HOA took over my land for a camp fest, they screamed when I unleashed my cattle stampede. Have you ever had someone walk onto your property like they owned it, acting like your life's work was just their playground? That's exactly what happened to Amos Caldwell, a third-generation rancher in the rolling hills of Willow Creek, Texas. His 200-acre cattle ranch, passed down from his grandfather, was his pride, his livelihood, and his sanctuary. But one summer, the newly formed HOA from the neighboring suburban development decided his land was the perfect spot for their community camp fest. What followed was a clash of wills, a storm of chaos, and a lesson in respecting boundaries that nobody would forget. It started innocently enough, or so it seemed. The Willow Creek Estates, a sprawl of cookie-cutter mansions, had sprung up just beyond Amos's barbed wire fences. The HOA, led by Karen Whitaker, a self-proclaimed community visionary with a clipboard and a superiority complex, sent Amos a letter. It politely informed him that they'd be using his northern pasture for a weekend camp festival: tents, bonfires, live music, the works. No permission requested, no compensation offered. Just a note assuming he'd roll over because their community needs trumped his rights. Amos crumpled the letter, his calloused hands shaking with fury. This was his land, his cattle's grazing ground, and he wasn't about to let some city transplants turn it into Coachella. He called Karen, keeping his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, that's my property. You can't just waltz in and set up shop. Find another spot." Karen's response dripped with condescension. "Mr. Caldwell, this is for the greater good. Your cows won't mind sharing for a weekend. Besides, we've already sold tickets." Amos hung up, his jaw clenched. He wasn't a man of many words, but he was a man of action. He posted "no trespassing" signs along the fence line and figured that'd be the end of it. He was wrong. The HOA didn't back down. They doubled down. Karen, armed with a team of lawyers and a petition signed by 200 homeowners, claimed the land was underutilized and invoked some obscure zoning loophole they'd pressured the county to consider. They argued the festival would boost local tourism and that Amos was being selfish by denying them access. Social media posts from the HOA's official account painted him as a grumpy old rancher standing in the way of progress. Neighbors he'd never met started giving him dirty looks at the feed store. Meanwhile, Karen's crew began staking out his pasture, measuring for stages and porta-potties like they'd already won. Enter Lila Martinez, the twist in this tale. A young environmental lawyer who'd recently moved back to Willow Creek after years in Austin. Lila had grown up on a nearby farm and knew the value of land. She'd been following the HOA's antics on X, where locals vented about Karen's overreach. One night, Lila knocked on Amos's door, her pickup parked beside his. "I saw what they're doing to you," she said, her eyes fierce. "I want to help. Pro bono." Amos, wary but desperate, let her in. Over coffee, Lila laid out a plan. They'd fight the HOA legally, proving Amos's property rights were ironclad, but they'd also need to make a statement. "These people won't listen until they're forced to," she said. Amos nodded, a spark igniting in his weathered eyes. The legal battle kicked off with Lila filing an injunction to halt the festival. She dug up deeds, surveyed maps, and old county records, proving Amos's land was untouchable. But Karen's lawyers were slick, delaying hearings and spinning the narrative. The festival was 2 weeks away and the HOA showed no signs of stopping. That's when Karen made her fatal mistake. Ignoring the injunction, she sent a crew to cut Amos's fence, letting a dozen festival organizers onto his land to set up tents. Amos watched from his porch, his shotgun resting against the railing to use, but to remind himself he wasn't helpless. Lila, beside him, whispered, "They just crossed a line. Now it's our move." Amos's move was as bold as it was reckless. He'd spent 40 years working cattle, and he knew their power. His herd of 150 longhorns, skittish and strong, grazed in the southern pasture. That night, under a moonless sky, he and Lila hatched a plan. They'd herd the cattle through the northern pasture, right where the HOA's tents were going up. "No one gets hurt," Amos said. "Just scared enough to learn." Lila grinned, her city polish giving way to her country roots. "Let's give him a Texas welcome." At dawn, the festival organizers, Karen included, were sipping coffee by their half-built stage when the ground began to tremble. A low rumble grew into a roar. Amos, on horseback, drove his herd hard, his ranch hands flanking the cattle. Lila, filming from a safe distance, captured every second. The longhorns, spooked by Amos's shouts and the crack of his whip, thundered toward the pasture. Karen's crew froze, then screamed, scattering as 150 half-ton beasts barreled through. Tents collapsed, tables flipped, and porta-potties toppled into the dirt. Karen, in her pristine white blazer, tripped in the chaos, landing face-first in a cow pat. The cattle didn't touch a soul, but they left a trail of destruction and terror in their wake. The aftermath was glorious. Lila's video went viral on X, racking up millions of views. Hashtags like Cattle Stampede and HOA Karma trended for days. The HOA's festival was canceled, their reputation shredded. Karen tried to spin it, claiming Amos had endangered lives, but the sheriff, an old friend of Amos's, saw through it. He'd warned the HOA about trespassing, and Lila's evidence photos of the cut fence. The injunction papers sealed their fate. The county fined the HOA $50,000 for property damage and zoning violations. Karen was ousted as president, her visionary dreams buried under a pile of legal fees and public humiliation. But the real victory was quieter. Amos stood on his porch a week later, watching his cattle graze in the northern pasture, now peaceful again. Lila joined him, handing him a beer. "You didn't just save your land," she said. "You reminded folks what it means to stand up." Amos tipped his hat, a rare smile cracking his face. The land was his, not because of deeds or laws, but because he'd fought for Thuve's heart and all. This story isn't just about one rancher's revenge. It's about boundaries, respect, and the cost of entitlement. Amos's stampede was a last resort, a primal act in a world that's forgotten what land means to those who work it. So, what do you think? Was Amos right to unleash his herd, or did he go too far? Should the HOA have backed off sooner, or was their festival worth the fight? Share your thoughts. Let's hear where you stand on this clash of old Texas and new money.